Law changes are a very controversial topic in modern rugby, but the laws have continued to change since the first were written in 1846. From controversial decisions to innovative rule changes, let's dive into the most influential rugby law changes that revolutionised the sport and discover how these rules transformed rugby union and shaped it into the thrilling game we know and love today. Lineout lifting. The lineout in modern rugby is an amazing spectacle, and in my eyes, a work of art. But they weren't always this way. Pre-1999, it was illegal to lift at the lineout, which made them much more chaotic and pretty rough viewing. But by the mid-90s, teams were basically lifting players by boosting them up. But it's believed by many that it started in South Africa during their exile from the international game, and it was adopted by the whole world when they came back into the fold. There's also a very obvious point in lineout success rate that shows when they started lifting. In data gathered by Opta, we can see that between the 1987 and 1995 Rugby World Cups, lineout success rate improved marginally from 68% to 78%. But by 1999, when lifting was introduced, it jumped up by 9% before steadily rising to 91% in 2019. This change all of a sudden added a new dynamic to play. The lineout stopped being a scrappy free-for-all and became this magnificent Renaissance-esque being. It created an attacking platform that allowed people to more effectively create set-piece plays and also massively added to the lineout maul. It also made it easier to get the ball to the number 9 as nobody could touch the receiving player until they hit the ground. This probably helped lead to the 34% of tries in the 21-22 season in the Premiership that were scored from lineout mauls. The kicking team gets the throw for touch penalties. For most of the history of rugby, if your team kicked the ball out, the other team got the throw in at the lineout. But in 1992, this law changed to allow the team who kicked it out to throw it from a penalty. This changed the sport in some interesting ways. One was what the team would do with a penalty. In the past, teams would go for posts very often, whereas these days it's a lot more common to kick for the corner, even in the opposition 22. But it also changed how deadly a weapon the penalty can be. The simple act of keeping the ball meant the teams could create entire tactics based around winning penalties and trying to score tries from mauls, or the immediate phases after the lineout. Having a lineout in the opposition 22 was a much rarer occurrence before this law change. And to be honest, I think this is a good thing. Goal kicking is a fantastic part of the game that is commonly undervalued in the spectacle that it adds. But to me, mauls are still more interesting viewing. Points for tries. Another notable law change that happened in 1992 was the increase in points for a try from 4 to 5. But this wasn't the first time it happened. In 1888, the try score changed for the first time. It's unknown as to whether this was controversial at the time, but it undoubtedly changed the game in a fundamental aspect. Now, running with the ball has been part of the game since at least 1846 when the first laws were written, but would definitely have existed before that, probably around the 1820s, where the myth surrounding William Webb Ellis comes from. But before this change, you only got points for kicking the ball through the posts. Now, having the ability to get the ball over the line had become slightly more important than before. However, it wasn't what it's like now. In 1888, you only received 1 point for a try, but got 3 for the conversion, but these didn't stack like they do today. If you missed the kick, you got the 1 point for the try, but if you got the kick, you only got the 3 points from the conversion. This was called a goal from a try. In 1891, this changed to having 2 points for a try and 5 for the goal from try. This then changed again 14 years later in 1905 to be 3 from the try and 5 from the goal from try. Now, this is probably the point where the more focus on running started to come from. You can now score a significant amount of points without even needing to kick at goal anymore. It remained this way until the 70s when a try was raised to 4 points. By 1979, the try and the conversion were treated as separate scores. This fundamentally changed how the game was viewed. Before 1888, rugby was a kicking game, where the goal was to get the ball through the posts. Only one way of doing that was by scoring a try. Today, the game is viewed as a running or handling game, where the goal is to get the ball over the try line. The penalty goal. Around the same time as try scoring was added, the penalty goal was introduced. Previous to this, you could only score from a conversion and a drop goal. This changed the game massively, as there was now a greater deterrent to committing a penalty on the field, and may have been seen as a way to keep the kicking spirit of the game intact while also adding try scoring. After all, it is called rugby football. A penalty goal was equal to 2 points, but by 1891 this increased to 3 points, and has seemingly never changed since, which makes it the longest unchanged score in the sport's history, which I think is quite interesting, but I'm a bit of a nod, so it's probably not really. Penalty goals seem to be a part of the game that many people don't like, and I even said that I preferred watching the rolling mauls as opposed to watching people kick for goal. However, I do still think it's a very important part of the game and should be celebrated more than it is. It not only acts as a deterrent, but also adds to the tension at the end of close games. Giving a penalty away in your half has cost many teams victories over the years. The removal of hacking. Hacking is a term for a tactic that involves kicking an opponent's shins to trip them up, which to modern rugby fans would sound more similar to a football tackle than a rugby tackle. But in fact, rugby owes a lot to hacking. Calls for association to ban the practice of hacking came shortly after the rules were established in 1863. This, along with the limited laws around carrying the ball, led to a lot of clubs that played rugby rules to not join up, and it even caused Blackheath, who were a founding member of the FA, to leave the Football Association and eventually become a founding member of the RFU. Francis Maule Campbell, which if I've pronounced correctly is a fantastic name for a rugby man, who was the secretary of Blackheath, argued that hacking was part of the game and its removal would, quote, do away with the courage and pluck of the game, which sounds like the 19th century version of games gone soft, if you ask me. Despite Campbell's support for hacking, many clubs started banning the practice, and even Blackheath did in 1865. All mentions of hacking in the RFU's rules, written at their first meeting in 1871, were eventually removed, and the refusal to ban hacking actually led to rugby school not joining the RFU until 1890. The first ever international match in 1871 was played without hacking. Hacking is a law that would be considered very strange in the modern game. There are still many laws that exist today that most fans don't know exist, which you can find out about 7 of by watching this video right here. Thanks for watching.